almost like a Twitter or an X, whatever it is
So the
now,
person
like,
who's
your
I don't know.
like their thoughts and-
Mary Beth, you have to request to
I
share.
think that it's on.
I'll put this here so nobody sits in front of it.
As absolutely as much as I can. There are just some people I can only seem to be able to get to.
Through LinkedIn.
Yeah. Otherwise they don't respond.
Well, I still got a minute for Rich to get his thing set up and working.
That doesn't look like any of my legal stuff.
We get on the air here, thank you.
Well, so the interesting thing is having a PR group like manage your social is that like you become very prolific, right? Like you start publishing all this stuff and you say, oh, Vince, I read that article that you posted the other day. And I'm like, yeah, and I got no idea about it. And then, you know, it falls on me. I don't do that anymore. I just,
Okay, it's tonight's, Elizabeth, do you need a hand out?
Oh, I didn't know when I was gonna.
Okay.
Is Janet coming tonight?
We have gone live.
I
With
might
our
have
new
copies
system.
of us.
So she
I would
is,
not wanna have that
straight out.
I know, I missed that.
I think everybody else has one.
And I'll do my,
I was
I'll do my best to answer it, Jen, if I can't, we'll get you an answer tomorrow.
Still at about
Yeah, it goes
30
back
feet, but I'm
to 2025, I just have to find it,
Okay.
but I can ask you.
With a light, it's a light, if you can, I find myself not knowing what to do with myself.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a minute after, so I'll call the meeting to order. First order of business isn't on the agenda, it's the minutes of December 17th. Do I hear a motion to approve them as submitted?
Second.
Any amendments, changes, or corrections? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
I'll abstain.
Can I get the gentleman's name in the back?
I'm fielding essence up.
Thank you.
Fielding the school board member.
Yeah. I knew he was a member, I just couldn't remember his name.
And you had a face to put with the name.
All right. Just before we get into this, we received the email of your budget reduction package, so to speak. A concern that a lot of us have is the school has historically been increasing at twice the rate of inflation, which is totally unsustainable. People haven't figured out how to change it, but at some point in time, it's gonna blow up. Now, inflation this last year was 2.9%, and you're not down anywhere too close to that. So that's where I'm coming from, just so you know. And I think there are probably some people here that agree with me, and there's some that do not. So, I will turn the meeting over now to Mary Beth to present her revised budget proposed things to consider for cuts.
Well, thank you, and good to see everybody. I hope you had a nice holiday season. And we're back here in the new year. And one of the things I did want to offer to the committee, I know I had received the communication with some frustration that you got these materials so late today. And I can understand that because I know people are very conscientious around reviewing materials. I just want to kind of go over the timeline, and I think one of the things that we can continue to think about in terms of partnership is how we get this timing working a little bit better. But just so you know why you got them this morning and not earlier, we had our original meeting scheduled for December 10th, and you'll remember that fun, exciting snowstorm. And that got canceled, and the next meeting was pushed out until the 17th. Directly after that meeting, I met with the leadership team, the finance committee came together on the 18th, and school was out of session on the 19th for the holiday season. And so the board really felt like, let's give everybody the holiday break. First day back, which was Monday, the finance committee was meeting again to look at budget reduction scenarios that they wanted to bring forward to the board to get their full approval. We did that on Monday. Last night, the board met and reviewed the budget scenarios, gave some additional feedback, made some adjustments to reflect the will of the board. I got home at 9:30 last night. I was up at 4:30 this morning making a delayed opening call. And early this morning got, to work on this project, to update all the materials. So I wish it were different, that you had more time around that. And I think one of the things we can keep talking about is the schedule for this, because you have more time to look at things, and yet the way the schedule worked, there just wasn't any way around it.
Well, just so you know, our schedule is based on things that we have to do under New Hampshire law for town meeting. And we have basically one flex week between now and town meeting.
It is so tight, it is so tight. And I say that because I want you to know how seriously we take this and that we prioritize this work. And it wasn't just that, it kind of got around to sending it to you this morning. There were a series of meetings that needed to happen in order for you to get information that reflected the will of the board. All right, so that being said, I'm gonna walk through the budget reduction scenarios that you requested. One of the things I do wanna say is that part of this process on the 18th, the finance committee came together and they considered a wide range of options. Did a lot of brainstorming. They took some of the things that you raised around the library, around consolidation. All those things were part of the conversation. But in the end, the finance committee said these things seem like they would make the most sense for the school district. Some of these other things just didn't when they played out. And I'd be happy to go into detail if anybody would like that as to why certain things didn't work out. But, so what you're seeing here is not everything that was considered, but the end result of all the considerations. So the first thing that you see here is what the board is not recommending, but what the board is recommending, having sat in the meeting last night, clearly the budget that they put in front of you, the 6.72. But they have taken your request to see what reductions would look like very seriously, and so this is the 5% that the board has taken a look at, our leadership team has taken a look at, and if we need to make reductions, we feel these are the things that will least impact the district and our students. So one of the things that we looked at was a revenue measure, and that was increasing the meal costs that will ultimately offset the line item transfer into food service. So under the 5% budget, we would increase all meal costs by 50 cents. We would tap the high school trust. If you remember that number is up significantly next year. We would be tapping it at 80,000. That brings it down to the target level. So that is where that number is coming from. We would take 2 student enrichment activities and we would eliminate them. One would be the 8th grade field trip. There's been $10,000 in the budget to help support with that. We would pull that out and that would go entirely to families and students to raise that additional fund. And then we had worked to put into the budget funding for summer academic enrichment for students that may need a little extra boost over the course of the summer. These are not students that are on IEP, but could use a little additional support. Up until this year, that program was paid for by Title I. Title I funds went away, we had to put that into the budget. But when we look at the number of students that are actually accessing that program and the enrollment in that, it doesn't, if we have to cut something back, or that's a place where we're gonna be impacting very few students, and there may be other alternatives for them. So that you see those things coming out of the budget under student enrichment. The next deduction you see here is that we had already pulled down the line item that is in the budget for repairs to the building. Because we anticipated that we were gonna be sitting with some additional monies from the renovation project. We've left 15,000 in there. Under this model, we're taking that number down to 0. The impact of that is that's gonna have to go back in the budget next year, but we can cover it with funds this year. I know Dina and Janet have been working really hard to come up with final numbers for the building project. Right now, we are looking at about $115,000 in interest and about $100,000 in extra principal. So we do have some money there. So we felt like we could take that money down. But that is a number that will have to be in the budget so that we maintain our building. So we can get it down to 0 for 27, tap those resources. But at some point, that's gonna have to go back in the budget. Next is that we had some conversations with the bus company. Their initial bus contract had a very, very substantial increase in 27, and then a 6% increase in 28 and 29. In talking to them, they were able to push out the contract for 5 years and get that initial number way down and spread it out over the 6% over more years. And that actually took out about 22,000 from the budget. So that is another reduction that you see there. And then finally, we have I think I may have mentioned this before, a Dartmouth nonprofit board fellow, and she's been looking at our food service program. So she's done some initial work. She is presenting to the board next Tuesday. But in speaking to her around her preliminary observations, both of us going through the budget together, we both felt comfortable that we could look to reduce food costs through efficiencies by about $10,000. That some of the impact on that may require that we use less or fewer of local vendors, because that's the most expensive place in terms of acquiring foods, but that's gonna be an ongoing conversation to see what we can come up with. But ultimately, we felt that that was a number that we could bring down. So to get to the 5% budget, the target reductions were 161, and these reductions come in at 164. And I've kind of hit on these points as we walk through, which is to get implications. School lunch will go up from $4.50 to $5 for students, $5.50 to $6 for adults. Brings the high school trust target. But just as a reminder, once we draw down that trust, those students are now in the budget. And that money, we'll have to see exactly what enrollments look like next year. But again, that's money that we are likely gonna have to put back in the budget for 28. So part of what we're trying to do here is to not kick the problem down the road, right? We talked about eliminating district contribution to the 8th grade field trip and regular ed summer academic programming, bringing that repairs to building line to 0, spreading out the bus contract, and then planned efficiencies. The other budget we wanted to put forth is that there, at 4.88% budget, we tried to get it to 4.5 and couldn't get to a place that made sense. But if we increase the meal cost to $1, that gets us down to a 4.88 budget, and then all the other reductions would stay the same. Then what I will share with you is that in the board's conversation, and also Kristen, if you want to speak to this as well, but the board, again, took very seriously your request to see what budgets at 4% and 3% would look like. They indicated to me, or directed me to share with you, that as a board, they would find these 4% and 3% budget scenarios untenable. So I am reporting that out to you. At a 4% budget, the biggest concern here, I think for the board, and certainly a concern that we have as a leadership team, is that the only real way to get there is to go down a position. And so when we look at all the positions and where we have possibilities for taking a position out, that the least impactful move is to go down a sped teacher. And while we can deliver services to students, if we go down a sped teacher, we have the capacity to meet our IEP obligations. Part of the cost of doing that is that instead of having 3 special education teachers who are focusing on certain grade levels, you now have splitting those 8 grade levels between 2 special education teachers. So their ability to really understand and integrate the grade level curriculum goes down because they're covering more grade levels. It also limits our ability to do push-in terms of delivering services, and would probably put us in a position where we would have to do more pull-out for students. So that while we can deliver what we are required to deliver to students going down a special education teacher, we, leadership team and the board feels that would not be a wise move, because of the implications for students.
Can you explain, just because I'm not sure everybody's aware,
Yeah.
what push-in versus pull-out, what you mean
Thank
by
you.
that?
So right now, what happens is when students are receiving support, we're able to push our special education teachers into the classroom. There are a few interventions where that doesn't make sense, but for the most part, the teacher's going into the classroom and helping the students within that classroom, so that helps the student have a more integrated day. If you go down in terms of providers, the scheduling of that becomes very, very difficult, and you would go into a situation where you may have to pull those students out of their classroom to get their services. And then the question that gets challenging is, at what point of the day do you pull them out, and what do they miss when they do that? So that was the debate around this piece. Again, we've looked at lots of other options. This was the best worst option. But that if we went down to a 4%, this is what we would be looking at. Because the reduction of personnel is such a large budget item, we don't need to actually take out all the other things that we took out. We would have to go, again, tap the high school trust at 80,000, and everything that we're looking at suggests to us that the 5-year bus contract makes a lot of sense if we pull that out. That's what a 4% reduction looks like. And again, we talked about kind of the implications of reducing that special ed teacher. At a 3% reduction, that's where we have to kind of put everything else back in, and under that amount, we would have to increase the high school trust withdrawal to 100,000, leaving that $20,000 below target. Under 3%, we would eliminate a special education position. High school trust would be tapped at 100. Then those same student programs I talked to you about, zeroing out the repairs to building line item, 5-year bus contract, food cost efficiencies, and increasing meal costs by 50%. So that's what we have there. So I'm going to stop there. That's what you requested us to come back to you with. I'm sure you have many questions. I will do my very best to answer them. And so at this point, I will stop talking and turn it back over to you.
Can you explain a little more about the high school trust fund? And
Absolutely.
how that works and what that means to draw it down and why you have to put it back in?
Sure. So I shared this slide with you last week, or not last week, but the last time we met. And so all of our trust funds, the board has identified a target amount that they want to keep in there that could fund unforeseen situations that could cost the district a lot of money. So if you're looking at special education, if you're looking at the high school trust fund and the maintenance.
Could you speak up a bit? Some of us are wearing these days.
You got it, just give me the signal if it's not loud enough. So when we look at the high school tuition, you see that we're gonna draw that down by about $115,000 this year. But the blue line is what is in the fund, and the gray is the target. So you see that we still have some room there to get it down to target. Does that make sense? So that's the 80,000 that's coming down. But that 80,000 is paying for the new students that came into the budget, this enrollment for next year. So for example, currently, our 8th grade going into 9th grade has 6 more students than our current 7th grade has. So that larger number is, those students are gonna be going through high school for 4 years, right? So the 80,000 helps them cover that in the first year, but then there's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year. So that at some point you have to return that money to the budget. Now, the 7th grade is lower than, it's one of our lower level classes in terms of enrollment. So we don't know if we're gonna get new students or if anybody's gonna leave, so I can't say definitively you're gonna have to put the $80,000 back, but you at least have to be thinking about the students that's covering are gonna be in high school for 4 years, and this is covering only the first year. Is that helpful?
And the source for that funding is typically when we have a surplus,
Exactly.
and this year we did not.
This year, we are not anticipating a surplus. We had a surplus last year,
Right.
and the monies were added to those, but this year we are not anticipating a surplus.
So last year's surplus went to building maintenance and school enrollment.
Okay, so it can go sort of to all, dependent upon where your target is, it goes to the various trusts.
We identify actually in this process,
Yeah.
warrant articles that would say if there's a surplus, do this first, do this second, do this third.
Bill?
What's the enrollment of each of the high school grades that we're paying for?
Let me see if I can quickly.
I guess I'm asking you, how many students are graduating as opposed to how many are going from 8th grade to 9th grade?
Yeah, I'll have to find my enrollment numbers for that. Let me just
Tell you what, why don't you answer questions, I'll see if I can find it.
It's in the September board meeting materials.
That was the first question. And then,
Okay.
You're showing, I think, something on the order of $15,000 for repairs. Is there, and also there's about, 75,000 in the building maintenance fund. Is there a reason you can't fund that with the building maintenance fund?
Well, so what we're doing is, if the line item budget that you received initially, that line item is usually $49,000. We had already dropped it down 35,000, thinking that we could tap this. But now we're saying we'd drop it for the whole 49,000 to tap that. And the other thing that has become clearer since the last time we spoke is that we're looking at about $115,000 in in interest payments from the renovation project, and about $100,000 in unspent principal balance. So we feel really comfortable that certainly for for next year, we can cover those costs. Does that make sense?
So are you funding the $15,000 by reducing expense? Or are you funding it with
With
the
the-
balance of the fund?
With the balance of the funds,
Okay.
yes.
So the enrollment in 25-26 in grade 9, there are 16 students in Hanover, none in any other school. Grade 10, 16 in Hanover, 2 in Thetford, 1 in St. Johnsbury. 11th grade is 20 in Hanover, 4 in Thetford, 0 in St. Johnsbury. 12th grade, 21.5 in Hanover.
How does that student?
Yeah, I know, that's what I mean.
Is it like in Hanover?
It's a vocational, yeah.
0.5
There's
in Hartford
28 coming
vocational.
in.
Yeah.
And there is 26 going out, like grade 12.
That's what
What
I'm
did you say,
looking for.
21?
What's the net?
What do you-
Yeah.
Well, let
it's
me
20
finish, so those people who wanted the full
Yes.
numbers can
26
have
going
that.
out.
Grade 12, 21.5 in Hanover High, 3 in Thetford, 1 in St. Johnsbury, 0.5 in Hartford vocational.
So
28 will be entering from the 8th grade. Behind the 8th grade, we've got 22, 20, 17, and then go back up to 26 in grade 4. And you don't have this history, but maybe those in the audience who do can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think typically we have about 2 bubble classes, and that's what we see here. And it's actually spread out about equally from each other, yeah. So the 2 bubble classes this year are grade 4 and grade 8. And bubble classes, because they're on that bubble of, do you put them split or do you keep them together? And we usually split around, depending on the class, it depends on the personalities too. But it usually splits somewhere around 13 to 14,
So.
or 13 to 14 per class.
Could you just roll your numbers up and just explain to us, what's the net difference over the next 4 years you expect?
So do you want 4 years from now, or do you want every
Each of
year?
the next 4 years. So if we're talking
Okay.
about a bubble every so often, I
Right.
don't know how often your bubble comes, but it sounds like every 4 years.
Okay, I don't have totals, so I gotta do this in my head, and I was an English major, not a math major, so it's gonna take me a
You
second.
wanna read them to me and I'll write them down and we can.
Here, I can just pass you my computer, how's that?
We'll in total
Teamwork.
have 2 more next year that'll be in high school.
So it's 83.
Let's move on to the
That's right.
questions, and then we can.
And then-
That's right, so there's 2 more in total next year,
Yeah.
then another 2 more the year after. Can't do this as fast. Then we will reduce 2 the year after, and then we'll have 20.
It might be easier if Toby just does the totals, and then we can move on.
I was really impressed with myself.
I know, I'm pretty impressed too, but your brain power is being better used for the like.
So now we got
the bigger
4,
picture.
You
then
wanna use
minus
my
2.
papers?
Yeah, that would help.
But from what I'm hearing you say is that the net change is around 2 for the next
Give or
several
take
years,
each
plus or
year.
minus,
Yeah.
which is about what, 50,000?
Yes.
Well,
Yes,
no, but this
20.
year you've got 22 seniors, if you, I'm around,
Yeah.
who pays the Hartford cost?
I'm sorry, what?
Who pays the Hartford cost?
The school district.
We do, so,
Yeah.
so that's 20, it's not 21.5, right, it's 22.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
you've gotta count the other schools
And the
too.
other schools here, right? Look, you have
You
3
can't
and
forget
1.
Thetford and.
where do you
have
have, oh, I
26.
have no one, over there, I didn't catch that.
Alright, so that's 26 total.
So you've got 26, got it, yeah, you're right,
Wonderful.
two.
One of the
Right.
things I would offer
Yeah, no, I thought
is
it was 6, because I didn't.
that,
Can we I'm gonna make a request, can we let Toby just give us the final numbers
So
once
your
he's ready,
bubble
so we
class
can
isn't
actually
really
go
much of
on
a
with the
bubble
conversation?
relative to what's going out,
Okay.
right? It's not
I'm
that
trying to
crazy.
get a sense, you have established $275,000 as the target number, and how likely is that to get dinged plus or minus over the next several years?
So we had 6 new students coming in this year. That is not the normal number that we would have, so we have to tap into it more. That target is planned for roughly 10 new students having to cover that cost.
every year?
It's
Does-
course of all
unusual.
4 years.
Does all?
No. It's over the course of 1 year, because it's supposed to be for unexpected costs. Then it gets added into the budget, so the next year, those unexpected costs are now expected. And so they have to be, not have to be budgeted, but we aim to budget for
So
them. because
so
that would be-
you're still budgeting for like 12 unexpected kids sometime at a $275,000 level.
Yeah, it depends on
That's
what
the
the,
arithmetic.
it depends on what the per pupil cost is that we pay to the district, and it depends on the district and our contract. So we
Have you
estimated
ever
that 30.
had 12 extra students?
It's 10 that we're actually planning for, and we had 6 this year. So we can take this down farther, but the board feels very confident that this will help cover if we have that unexpectedness. And depending on what happens with open enrollment, this may be a real thing.
Yeah, some of the things that we saw this year, we had students that were being homeschooled, and then they enrolled in high school. So they were not in our books, they were not in our class sizes. We had a number of families move in that had high school students that had not been coming up through the system. We had some families that had students in private school and then moved them into Hanover. So there are a number of different ways that number can change, which is why I was trying to be a little bit tentative. We may cover it all next year, or it may be higher. Those things fluctuate all the time. So that 10 student buffer seemed to make the most sense. So we can make some initial guesses, but I would really caution you to say, oh, this is how much money we'll have, because lots of things can happen.
But you're budgeting 10 students at 27.5, and are you spending 27.5 now?
It's not at 27.5 this year. It's around 24.
So it's, okay, so it's 24, 25. So in fact, at $275,000, you are budgeting a dozen students increase, essentially, given today's math, and there have never been a dozen students, actually, as far as I can tell. Why don't we think about cutting that by another $75,000?
We have thought about that, and that's where the 3%, some of the 3% budget came from. The concern would be, are we cutting it too close with so many uncertainties in Concord right now? We could do it. That is one of the things we see. The board was less comfortable with that. I think that would be an accurate, and the administration makes advice to us, and I think the consensus of the board was
The
that.
other problem is that it only helps this year.
Yeah.
You know, you take the money out of the trust fund, the kids aren't going away, right? In fiscal year 26, you have 81 kids. Next year in fiscal year 27, you have 83, so 2 kids, so ballpark that at $45,000, but you're taking $80,000 out of the trust, in part because there's a deficit in the line this year. Because even when we budgeted, we planned to take money out of the trust fund, but now we're taking.
Math much faster than I
Listen, and then in fiscal year 28, as we just, according to Vince's math, not my math, we're gonna have 2 more kids in fiscal year 28, right? And so your problem is back next year. You haven't actually reduced, if we believe there's a fundamental problem with the operating budget because the town is becoming stressed to raise the money, you just create, and we've been doing this for years now, right, with the high school trust fund. This is your first year on the committee, right? So we've been playing, I'll just say playing this game. I don't mean to characterize it judgmentally, but we've been playing this game with the high school trust fund for years now. And eventually, this trust fund is gonna not be able to be spent because what we can't have happen, or what would be more disastrous is for 5 kids, or like this year, 6 kids land, and suddenly you have a $150,000 cost that you need to cover, and you don't have that trust fund, because you can't raise any more money once. You can have a special meeting. I wouldn't
You mean
support
once the
budgeting,
budget
I
is-
wouldn't support budgeting like that.
But
Once
we're
this
not-
operating budget is set, it's set in March, and that's what you have. Anything that happens between March and the start of the actual next fiscal year of the school is, you've made your best educated guess. And so that's why the trust funds, that's why these funds exist. But how much should they be funded is a good question.
We're not suggesting eliminating it, we're suggesting if our best worst guess is the 6 that we have now, why are we thinking of budgeting for 12?
So here's the reason.
Because we're gonna need it. We're gonna
Oh,
use it
because
again
the-
next
and the
year,
answer.
we're gonna use it again the year after that, and probably the year after that. And we're not potentially going to have a surplus to put back in, right? So any way you work this, you've gotta put money back into that trust fund at some point in time.
And Jen, I think to your point, what you said before is, next year, it's no longer unexpected. We're going to have to spend the money, and we can't keep drawing down the trust fund to do it. So if we're going to draw down the trust fund, to your point, I would do it more gradually, which is always what we've been trying to do. And then there have been things where it has to be an underfunded line item before you can tap the trust. And then for various reasons, past years, it has not ended up being underfunded. This year, we're going more ambitious with a higher number than we think, and hoping that we will be tapping into that trust. We've been trying to bring it down. But to Mary Beth's point, next year, that $80,000 has to be covered. So you're just gonna have a bigger jump in that line item next year if
But
you take
that'd
that
be in
trust.
the operating budget.
The operating budget, exactly.
So.
And then if I can make oh, go ahead, Toby, sorry.
If you'd like to know what projected enrollment is for the next 10 years,
And this
8
one,
years,
only high school?
only high school. This is if enrollment grade by grade doesn't change. Grades typically get a little bigger as they get older, not always. It's 85 total high school students this year, it'll be 87 next year, 85 the year after that, 86 the year after that, 87 the year after that, 85 the year after that, 85 the year after that, 85 the year after that, 81 the year after that, that's 33, 34. If you can fathom that being a year will exist in, and then 72 the year after that. But that,
Is that the kindergarten class right now?
Yeah, that's-
Basically being seniors or whatever?
no, that was when they were freshmen.
Okay. That's gonna change it.
Yeah.
You really believe we're gonna get off that
Oh, no.
85 to 87
No.
year?
Kindergarten is where people are schooling elsewhere and then return back to the Lyme system.
So, I mean, looking at
Lyme
10
enrollment
years
has
from
been
now, it being
remarkably
72
stable.
is pretty
It's been
unreasonable.
remarkably stable.
We won't be able to budget.
Birth rates have gone down precipitously, so it could be that we're just gonna have less kids around.
So,
Now, what we haven't touched on, which I think is important here, we keep talking about how much we're taking out of the fund, how much we're taking out of the fund, how much we're taking out of the fund. Now, anybody that has a budget that works for the government knows there's a whole bunch of things that get spent the last week of the budget cycle. That's when you buy the new copiers and the new computers and et cetera, having put in an order for 1,000 Apple IIs at midnight on September 30th. But
that's not taking you at all.
But what I'm saying is, there's a certain amount of frugality that can be exercised throughout the year that can leave you with money to put back into these trust funds. Because just as we can have an increase in students, we can have a decrease in some of the other accounts. So to say that there's never going to be some money to put back into the trust funds, I think is unreasonable.
Oh, I don't, I'm hoping that people didn't hear that that's what I said.
But that's the way
because
we're
certainly was-
processing it right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, hopefully there, and there has been in the past. And if you remember this year, part of the issue that we're running into is that healthcare assessment, is the structural deficit in food service. Were those things not there, we would be likely looking at $200,000.
No.
I'm gonna ask my difficult and unpopular question again, because I am not convinced on this one at all. Your unacceptable cut levels suggest cutting a sped teacher. That's a student-facing cut. You still have now 3 administrators for what one principal was asked to do a number of years ago. I do not understand that if I'm cutting something, I'm cutting $150,000 administrator, not a sped teacher.
So one correction I'm gonna say to that, it was a principal and a part-time superintendent.
Okay, yeah,
So
that's,
And
yeah.
you wanna answer that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I wanna let you know that we looked at everything, but we collectively have spent a lot of time running schools and running school districts. And the functions that are there impact every single student. The curriculum and instruction person is impacting grade level curriculum in 5 different content areas, and coordinating what's happening in between grade levels. She coordinates all the assessments of the building and knowing where intervention needs to happen. She coordinates all the professional development for teachers so that they are staying on top of and are coordinated in their approach in the classroom to instruction. The special education director that was there before, that role requires lots of meetings, and that is a very heavy legal regulated piece
Yeah,
for
right.
special education. The principal runs the building. And the superintendent runs, working with the board, working at the state level, working at central office, so that, you know, the 50 people that work for the district get paid. They have their health insurance benefits, all those types of things. If you take those things away, the system is undermined. And so that is something that we considered, but that in terms of actual impact for all students, this is where we would say that there would be the least amount of impact. We would have to make some changes for those targeted students. We could provide them with what their IEPs are indicating. We are not recommending it because the system that you have now really ensures a high level of service for those students, and they get their services in a way that is most beneficial to them. But if you have to cut, your charge to us was, if you have to cut, what would you do? And that, I know it's not popular, but that is where we landed in terms of the analysis.
And if I could just add to that, the board did discuss that question yesterday,
Okay.
because we anticipated this question coming up today.
Good.
And one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that this role, the administrative role in general, has changed over the years. Concord is requiring many more things out of our out of our school systems. And if we don't have administrators who are doing those things, it falls on the teachers, it falls on the principal, it falls on, it falls on other people. We also, when we looked at what we would spend the money on, if you told us this is what we have, we looked at what would cause the least impact to the most students. And we talked specifically about administration, and in particular, the academic director impacts every single student in the school. Often is correct me if I'm wrong, often is student facing, but always teacher, working with teachers hand in hand. So that's why this one.
Let me push back a little bit. My daughter has taught at Concord High for 16 years. She's in the science area. There's a whole bunch of science teachers. They have to coordinate a lot about curriculum. Essentially, you have one teacher in each grade. Occasionally, you have say the principal runs the school, but haven't principals from time immemorial to some extent managed curriculums? Is this not something that could be part of his job?
I would say no. I shouldn't say it. Can you do, if you tell us, like, this is the money you have at some point, we would have to make that decision, right? But what would the impact of that be? The principal is pretty straight out doing the work that he needs to do to run the school, to evaluate the staff, to make sure all the schedules are running, to make sure that all the parent issues are dealt with, behavioral issues are dealt with. I watch him. He is a very busy man. And what the curriculum coordinator is doing, when you think about curriculum, it's both horizontal and vertical curriculum alignment. So horizontal, you're right, there's not a lot of sections. I've worked in districts where we'd have 10 or 12 sections in a school of first grade, right? So getting the horizontal alignment is not particularly challenging, but ensuring that what the first grade class is doing in terms of reading and writing and mathematics feeds seamlessly into the second grade, and there's alignment in terms of instructional strategies and vocabulary in the next piece that needs to be learned for students. You need that coordination between K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And you don't just need it in reading, you need it in writing, you need it in math, you need it in social studies. So that's the kind of work that this person is doing. And then you have to look at, this is what we want our students to know and be able to do. How are they doing? Are they getting it? Are they not getting it? Who figures that out? Who runs all the assessments? Who sits down with the teachers and says, let's look at the data. Let's look at the resources we have for intervention and which of our students need that intervention. And then coordinating, okay, we've got this resource, these kids need this. That is a whole body of work. This is somebody that works with new teachers and helps to get them up to speed, is providing all the professional development for teachers. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, and I have a little voice issue, so, but those are the kinds of things that would not happen without that type of position. And I have seen districts where that position does not exist, and there aren't many districts left that don't have it. But what you get is very siloed, very uncoordinated programs. And for kids, what you get depends on who you get, right? Because the system is not coordinated and aligned. So that's my passionate plea around that piece, but
What you get is always who you get.
Yeah, well, you know, when
The teacher is somebody you connect with or you don't.
well, those relationships are always critical, right?
Yeah.
But when you have a system functioning really well, as opposed to teachers feeling like, I'm in a silo, I've gotta do this all myself, that's a very different type of setup. And I will tell you that I think Lyme School does that remarkably well, and kids are well served by that.
My dear friend was the curriculum coordinator in Newton, but we are not Newton.
Phil, can you yield the
I
floor?
just, I don't know whether there are any other questions about that, I had a couple other questions.
Yeah, I'm done.
All right, go ahead, you got the floor.
Just questions from I guess from an equity lens, when we're thinking about the increase of cost of meals, and then the summer programs too. With the increase in cost of meals, I know there are resources for families who can't afford meals, so that one seems like that increase is not gonna be as big of a challenge.
Any situation where we have either had information about free or reduced lunch,
Yeah.
or we've had information that a family is struggling,
Yeah, that would be.
we take care of that, yeah.
Then the summer programming, I'm really curious about that from an equity standpoint, because I know, when kids qualify for that, it's taken care of, but you're saying there's a good number of students who participate in that kind of programming. And I guess maybe it's gonna be more anecdotal than, based in data, but what do you see, like, is that providing essential support and care for students above and beyond academic support? Like, is it social emotional support? If we lose something like that, is it gonna be bad for those kids and those families?
Yeah. And, you know, I don't have a ton of
Yeah, I know
history
that's a hard
around that.
question
I
to
will
ask.
tell you what I've heard anecdotally.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of our families and a lot of students have fairly robust summer plans.
Mhm.
They're going to camps, they're doing a lot of that type of thing. And so that's part of the reason that the enrollment is lower, we don't have a lot of people taking advantage of it. It is primarily focused on helping kids continue to have reading experiences and those type of things. I would say it's more academic
Yeah,
than social.
okay.
Is that, so I think I misunderstood that one, so is that for all summer school programming?
No,
Or is that
so-
just kids who don't have an
Don't, like,
IEP?
Yeah, so
Okay.
what you see in most places, well, legally, if students can be on an IEP, and if one of the services that they can qualify for, the team can say the student needs is something called extended year services. That means that this student will significantly regress during the summer unless they get additional instruction. So by law, we are required to ensure that any student that has extended year services in their IEP gets those services. Then there are students that are regular ed that sometimes can use a little bit more boost, right? And typically, almost always you see that funded by Title I. We lost our Title I funding this year. So we do not have the typical funding source to provide programming for students that are not on IEPs over the course of the summer. The reason that this kind of came out as something that we felt like we could put on the list is that there are so few students accessing it right now that that cost benefit is not as great as we would like it to be. Is that to say that no student benefits from it? No, I will not tell you that. There are students, I am sure, that will benefit from it. It's a very small amount. But these are the impacts of making reductions, right?
Why did we lose that funding? I think you told us last time.
Yeah, no, it's based on free and reduced lunch numbers, and our numbers are so low that we no longer qualify,
That's a sign of a changing demographic,
yes.
yeah.
Well, our numbers have always been so low that one family moving out of town.
Yeah, it's not like there's a huge buffer,
Right,
but,
and the same thing
but,
with WIC.
yeah, in the
Yeah, I
past,
know, that makes sense.
My question though is, there are certain things that both towns can save money by doing them together rather than independently. And I know it's difficult to cross school district lines. Everybody wants the, not invented here, we would wanna share the police department with Lyme and Norfolk, for example. But at some point in time, you have to look at things like that, and I'm concerned.
So,
yeah, do you wanna speak to
yeah,
that?
you went on board with
Yes,
this.
we
So
did.
when Frank was here, he spent a significant amount of time talking with the Dresden School District about, and Jen, you were on the board during part of that time, I think, it was the initial discussions, about utilizing and contracting out some of our administrative services, the business administration piece. Because part of our problem is there's no redundancy for our business administrator, so she can barely take a vacation. So one of the ideas was that we would contract with, we'd still need people in our office, I just wanna say that right now. That would not eliminate the need for a business administrator or assistant, but it would give some redundancy and things like that. In the initial discussions, it was looking very promising. I think I think Dina had some concerns but we never got far enough to even talk to you about it, because after we started pursuing it further and Frank got down to kind of what a contract might look like, suddenly those initial oh, that looks very reasonable, became very unreasonable. That it was gonna cost us more money to contract out to Hanover to
Well,
dress.
as I say, that may happen in certain things. In certain other things, it might not.
But that's what we've looked at a number of different things, that's just the most recent one. We've talked about when we were hiring a superintendent, could we share a superintendent?
Yep.
That, you know, there's all sorts of things, you know, Grantham just went to a full-time superintendent, is that, yeah, we're talking about that, which is interesting. We talked about, you know, are there other places? Yes, those are things that we would like, you know, to look for efficiencies right now. You know, there's only so much, again, our administrators can do, but I hope that's something Mary Beth will be looking at as she dives more into the process. She's looking at food service efficiencies at the moment.
I mean, I know you say Grantham just went to a full-time superintendent, but they were at 80, right? And they've been at 80% for years. And their 80% superintendent, I remember this because when our district administrator resigned, we were really desperate, and we had contacted Sydney, who was the superintendent at the time, and she had 1 day a week off, but that was like barely 1 day a week off, because she was 80% time in Grantham. And she had told us, if you get really stuck and you can't open your school, you call me back, I will help you. You know, I'll come up and I'll sign, you just need someone to sign papers, basically. So they've gone from 80 to 20. Just to point to Grantham, when we talk about a position like the academic director, as I understand it, Grantham, Cornish, and Plainfield are triangulated in sharing an academic director. Plainfield and Cornish in maybe 2019, Frank actually oversaw this in Plainfield and Cornish. Plainfield puts all the superintendent administrative costs and other business costs on their budget, and they have a revenue line for SAU, because Cornish actually pays for 50% of those costs. And so they've been sharing superintendent, special education director, business administrator for, I think, since 2019. And I'm not gonna say that their finances, right, that Plainfield and Cornish aren't having, right, the same conversation that we're having, which is that, you know, running these small rural districts is very expensive for towns that have maybe income wealth, but the property, and property wealth, but the total assessed value is starting to really become very constrictive for certain people, maybe less constrictive for other people. In the process of Plainfield and Cornish setting up that SAU, they found other like avenues to share, right? They're sharing some music specialist costs and those sorts of things, because once I think you open that door and you start that relationship, the first 2 years are probably gonna be a lot of work and very challenging, but then, you know, all I'm gonna say is, we haven't done, to my knowledge.
We have.
Well, where?
We've looked at other pieces, again, we've talked about, could you share special education? Could you share, and a couple things I'll say about this, you cannot explore every single thing all at once, because each thing takes time to explore. So Frank was devoting a ton of time to this contract that did not work with Hanover. Mary Beth knew, I'm not gonna ask her why she hasn't figured out it, you know, why haven't you figured that out, right? But that's something
That's on tomorrow's list.
Yeah, exactly, but that's something that certainly can be explored.
But it's not the strategic plan.
The other thing I am going to say is that the whole town helped create the strategic plan, so if that wasn't part of the strategic plan, shame on those people who wanted to see it as part of it. But what I will say is that the other thing that is overhanging all of this is, if we, for example, start sharing specials, which is what you just mentioned, right? If we start to lose students through open enrollment to other districts, because they have the thing that we don't have, that's gonna cost this town far more money.
Right, okay, that's
So-
fine, but I
so-
think that's
so-
a red herring.
Hold on,
because
hold
that
on, hold on,
open
you asked me to answer
enrollment-
the question, and I'm gonna answer the question, so let me finish. So that's always one of the things we're thinking about, and I don't mean to shout, but I would like to finish what I'm talking about. And I think it is important that we understand that there are things happening at the legislative level that we have no idea what they're gonna look like next year. And always in the back of our heads, we are thinking, what happens if open enrollment occurs, the law changes from even what it looks like right now to we have no control over it. We are suddenly in a market where we're competing to keep our students in this district. So we are not paying 80% of our per pupil cost to another district and fighting to keep our school. in the condition that it is. So that is something I think about constantly when we think about cutting anything. What has the least impact to our services, what has the least impact to our students, and what is going to continue to ensure that we're providing a high-quality education that people want to be in the Lyme School for. So I apologize, I know you had more to say, but I did want to finish that whole thought.
That's fine, I just wanna say, I think the open enrollment thing is a bit of a red herring, right? Because that's something that happened in this school year, where you had one court case, right? Where Prospect Mountain Academy has been told by a court that they are able, or I should say Pittsfield has been told by a court that sure, you have to pay. This is how RSA, whichever one it is, which has been on the books since 2009, a court just this year said this is how we're gonna interpret it, this is how it looks. But I was on the board 21, 22, 23, and I think I don't know that anybody, I think when I was on the board, I started to push a little bit more about sharing these costs, and it never really manifested, it never really went anywhere. People, I don't think it's fair to say that the sharing of the district core costs is not something we should do, or not something that we looked into because we were afraid of open enrollment. I think it's been many years, and it really hasn't been looked at.
So again, I will say, open enrollment looks totally different than what you're talking about. And we don't even know the full scope of it, and Mary Beth's been having meetings about it with superintendents, it is a different beast.
You're talking about the prediction of potential legislative change for bills that I don't even know that these bills are gonna be introduced in 2026 because they went through in 2025.
They're back,
They're committees to study, right? Because they can't introduce
They can introduce them.
They can try, and they may be able to do it, and they may not be able to do it. All of this is very hypothetical, and it's something that happened in this biennium. It will be, I don't disagree with you, it's gonna be back. I think they're probably, they got the EFAs passed, there's no income limits on those anymore. They're probably gonna do the open enrollment thing. You're probably correct. This could be a real problem. I think it could be a problem for the Lyme School whether we change the special circumstance or not. I personally, I'll say, I'm just my N of one. My daughter loves the school, she loves the middle school. I'm not a parent that would probably say, I'm gonna take my child to Richmond for middle school. But I can tell you that I think that there are parents who would do that. And it doesn't have anything to do with specials. And it doesn't have anything to do with them feeling that our school is necessarily deficient. It's just that Richmond's bigger. And with that scale, they can provide more diversity and more differentiation potentially in particularly mathematics, reading, and science. Am I wrong? I look at Vince because he's also a middle school parent. And so, and I don't know.
That's totally true, right?
Right, and so that's just a thing, and I don't know how you deal with that. And I think that we have to be open to looking at it, but I don't think there's any way that we can approach this budget and try to, I think we know what we know today, and we know the problems that we have with supporting this budget financially today, regardless of what happens with open enrollment tomorrow. But I absolutely agree, it's a big threat.
I think we know that the legislature in Concord is going to be as anti-education as it can possibly be, and do everything it can to not provide the towns with as much support as would solve these problems. But we don't know the future, and we don't know how to predict that, and we don't know what the final outcome of that will be. What we can think about, perhaps, or at least what I would like to think about, is both south of us and north of us, we have interstate school districts. We have Orford and Fairleigh, we have Dresden and Hanover. Have we looked at anything having to do possibly with Thetford or East Thetford and cooperation across state lines in ways that might share these kinds of costs?
So I hesitate to talk about this with this budget because we're not gonna implement any of these things for this budget.
Right.
We can
That's
charge
true.
our superintendent with looking at these. I feel like, yes, and Jen, I think to your point, we have looked at things, but again, they're only she's only a half-time person who works way more than half-time. You know, and we have to prioritize what is the thing that we need to look at. We can charge the superintendent with starting to look at that. It's not gonna happen for this budget. I think that's just the reality. I also wanna acknowledge that it was said in the meeting last night that we can cut all we want. If it's a bridge too far for voters, they will add it back on, in on the floor. So we were also very thoughtful about what are the implications of the cuts we are not recommending, because the budget we recommended was the one we presented in December. Maybe they'll change it, the bus contract. But what are the ones that we think voters in the town have shown, or in the school district have shown over and over again, these are the things they value. We can try again, but I don't, if we go too far, someone will put an amendment on the floor and you know, it'll get added back in. The other thing I would also like to point out is this is a bottom line budget. The district decides how we spend our money. You might want us to cut one position, that would not be the position we cut. The board does not support a cut, a position. We do not support cutting any positions. If we had to cut a position, you saw the one that the administration recommended, we would go with the administration's recommendation because they are the experts. But the board was not in favor, and it was very clear, the majority, if not all the board, I don't want to speak for everyone, because we didn't take a vote, but the majority of the board was not in favor of cutting positions. And the only way to really bring this budget down is to tap entirely into the trusts, which is just kicking the can down the road, or to cut people and programs. We cut some programs. We did not cut people.
My pet peeve always has been when you split a class, because that costs you $100,000 when you split a class.
Certainly more than that.
Well, maybe.
And benefits.
Anyway, throw out whatever the number is. It's over 100,000.
127.5.
I've been saying 100 for a long time.
And 23 cents.
But the point being, most of us, when we went to school, never had the privilege of having a class of 14 or 15. We're used to a class of 30. And we keep getting this, no, things are different today. The kids are not as well behaved. Or if we get over a certain number, we need to put a teacher's aide in there to help the teacher out, et cetera, et cetera. And what I really get very frustrated in hearing of why we can't. There seems to be, and there is a point where the budget committee and the school board and the school administration can agree on something to present at the school district meeting. We did that a couple of years ago when some people in the audience didn't agree with what we agreed on.
270 of them didn't agree with it.
I'm not.
But who's counting?
But who's counting?
But I would like to be able to go and present a budget that we can all support. And nobody's gonna get everything they want. I'm not gonna get my 2.9%, I know that. But you're not gonna get 8% either.
And we didn't propose that.
So, and I think it's very important, I think this budget reduction scenarios, just to make sure I'm thinking correctly here, when you say a budget of 5% budget means a 5% increase over last year.
Exactly.
4% is 4% increase over last year.
Exactly, yeah.
So that it's clear what we're dealing with. Now, I get the feeling that you can get to 5% without a real issues. You can't get to 3%.
3 or 4 when we looked at it.
Yeah.
To get to 4, you've gotta go down a position.
So, for lack of anything better to say, if we're gonna work for a budget that we can all support it somewhere between 4 and 5%.
I would agree with that, but I would also say, looking at the 5% budget increase, many of these things aren't actual reductions to the operating budget. It's taking $80,000 from the high school trust. Okay, that's back, we're talking about that again next year. Those repairs to the building line item, those are back next year, right? Like, it's not an actual, like, long-term sustainable reduction. So what I want to have happen is somehow create some sort of meeting structure for next year, something where we can all talk holistically about what's happening at the municipal level and what some of the needs are there. Because also, like, to make the point, nobody really is thinking we're going to decrease the school budget and suddenly the tax rate's going to go down. That money is shifting, right, to the municipal budget, where we now, after next year, we don't have a fire chief anymore, Aaron's resigned, which means we need to figure out how to fill that spot. Because if we don't have a fire chief, depending on how far away you live from Hanover, you're not gonna be able to insure your house potentially when we don't have a fire department, right? So as a municipality and as the government and municipality, like, we need to recognize that, we need to tell people about that, and we need to figure out a way to deal with it. Building inspections. Aaron's been doing the building inspections on commercial buildings too, right? And so with him gone, now we need a commercial building inspector.
Is that it?
Yes. Next year's his last year.
He's like done with his contract, or?
No,
He
there's
doesn't have
no
a contract.
And he mentioned at yesterday's, Tuesday's select board meeting, that he was going to shoot for this next year being his last year. He's looking for somebody else. Doesn't mean that he's gonna walk out the door, just so everybody knows.
But he's really stressed.
He's looking.
He's
looking
come in
for
here and he's
somebody.
explained that
That's
to
right.
us, and Andy came and helped explain the stress on that system, and I think it's a real stress. We've been hearing about it for years, we heard about it from Mike Monday, to some extent, right? So it's not a new thing, right? It's just something
Well,
that
you
we've
can
been
go back to
like,
Ken Elder.
I mean, it's just something that we haven't, that we haven't been dealing with, right? We can't get a deputy town clerk. Let's talk about, like, why is that? Are we not offering enough money? I don't know.
There was an email that would answer that question.
Right, but there's stuff, and I think that it's unfair.
Right.
I don't think it's unfair, or at least I think it's unhelpful to have these budget conversations siloed off, right? Because it's not, it's not that we as a budget committee are concerned about the increases in the school budget because we want to have that money, like, go back to the town or something. Like, it's really more of like moving, right? That's how I see it anyway.
I think your silo definition is by year, not so much by subject.
That problem too.
Because we can't get an idea what next year, that's why I asked about tuition, just as an example, because I have no idea. Or even, if we are concerned about what Concord may or may not do, that means we absolve ourselves from any concern about what we're voting today. Because tomorrow it could be, I'm putting words in your mouth, I know that, but that's kind of the inference that is there. Let me finish, because
Yeah, no,
I gave you
absolutely.
that privilege.
No, absolutely. I'm not
Thank you.
interrupting you.
So I'd like to suggest that we vote as soon as possible on a calendar basis for a recommendation for a percent increase for what we recommend. If the school board doesn't buy it, that's their deal. I can't be accountable to that. I can only be accountable to the taxpayers and seeing that we're getting good value for the money we're giving to the school and to the town. I think we try to do that on a balanced basis. We're not educators, we're not supposing. The work that you did to get here, I'm sure wasn't easy. I'm taking you at your word, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I'm taking your word that this is your best guess of how you would spend the money to get to one of these different levels. And we're not in a position to disagree in any way, shape, or form, so I'm accepting those as your proposal. As the way we did with all of the with all of the town departments too. We did that, we took that same, but we're not running the roads, we're not doing recycling, okay. So that's what, this is just for the benefit of our committee. I mean, I think that's, the only thing we can possibly do is talk about getting to a number that we can recommend to the town for town meeting and school meeting. And that all these other things will work themselves out sooner or later, but they're not things that we can anticipate in any meaningful way to decide how much money to spend this year, or to recommend to spend this year. It's just, plus it's not our mandate. if we wanna change the way we do things, we're gonna have to do something different, which might be, we could call it a town/school finance committee, and we could do long-range projections, and we could do some other ways of looking at how to get a better handle on the future, but we don't have that capacity, we don't have that insight, and even more ridiculously, we can't count on Concord to do anything that's going to make our life easier in terms of dollars anyway. So I'll just leave it at that. So I think we need to come back to the dollar we're gonna recommend to the town meeting and the school meeting, excuse me.
Now, the last meeting or the meeting before, we went around the table, rather than just who waved their hand and waved the loudest. So why don't we start with you, Rich, with any questions you wanna ask? Just go around the table so everybody gets a chance, not interrupted, not challenged, but whatever your questions are.
I brought a couple questions with me. I think everybody's done a good job of asking them, and I've heard your answers. Thank you.
Can I ask a process question? So are we each voting on things today? Can I ask that kind of? How does this work? Yeah, how does this work? Like, because that will help me figure out what questions to ask right now.
I would say that, I will just throw out something for people to base the questions on, and that is recommending the 5% budget.
The question is, are you gonna try to vote on, is
No,
everybody
but,
ready to vote on
but
something?
people, her question was, knowing what we might have to vote on may change what my questions are.
Right.
So if we go around the table projecting or thinking in terms of the 5% budget, that should tell you what your questions are.
Okay, so then I guess my question would be, 5% budget up here on the screen, and at the December meeting, I think it was 6%, 6.8, 6.72.
Yeah, that's what we started at.
So one question would be, the budget that you proposed in December, that was 6.72, would you keep it at that, or is there anything on here that, in going through this whole process, that you would change anything with the 7.2? I heard you mention the 5-year bus contract, and I'm just curious if there's anything else from that you would take. So it wouldn't be 5%, it wouldn't be 6.2, it would be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I would say that I think collectively with the board that we see the 5-year bus contract as kind of a no-brainer to go forward with that. So regardless, we would make that change there. Certainly I heard, as you did last night, loud and clear, that the board feels like their recommended budget is the one that came forth in December. So that, I think that's where the board is sitting. And I guess that's when I want to turn it over to you, Kristen, to.
I think many people have, I think the board in the majority would vote to take some money out of the high school trust. Is the 80,000 the number? I don't know. But I think we would not feel comfortable going below the target, but I think up to the target we would. So some of that, if not all of that, might also go into a final, if you say 5% is where we want to be.
And one of the things I would also add, that what I heard is that your recommended budget is the 6.72, the question was asked, what could you live with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the board said we could most likely live with this 5% budget, or potentially.
Well, I'm saying that because if you ask for too much and go to the meeting, there's gonna be a little old lady in the back of the room that's saying, cut 250,000. So you gotta, you don't have just people adding budget, you've got to pick something in the middle. That's why I said, let's discuss going with the 5 at this point for the questions that are asked.
The only other, this is just a comment, not so much a question, is Stacy brought up the equity issue with the increase in the meal costs. And I know there's the free and reduced lunch prices, but I do think that sometimes those are often so so tight they're so low that it does exclude some families. So it might still be a stress for some families, even if they don't qualify for that. So that's just in the back of my mind a bit, but I
And
also think the.
this would be something I would just offer as somebody that's new to Lyme, is that there is a remarkable sense of caring in this community. And because it's small, people know families and children, and if there is any worry at all that students need help with food, be it at lunch, the answer is yes, we gotcha.
Right.
And that comes from the community, and I think the value of everybody that works in that building.
There are a lot of things that are being discussed around the food service thing. I don't want to speak out of turn necessarily, but we're looking at lots of ways to reduce costs, budget more efficiently. And then also, we're looking at potentially doing some different programs where people might be able to opt in to pay more if they, feel strongly about a good lunch program or, but there are things that we have a Dartmouth grad or
Tuck student.
Who's really diving deep into it and coming up with proposals for how we can make this great lunch program work for everyone.
Thank you. I think that's all for me.
I asked all the questions that I wanted to ask. I would just say I would advocate for fully funding the school at whatever is recommended, but I think the efficiencies being really great options to bring it down from the 6.72. I always get concerned whenever student enrichment related programs are cut, but the information you gave me about the summer program is really helpful to have too. So, yeah, thank you again for all the work that went into this. I know it was not easy, so, no additional questions for me.
I don't have a question. This, as with the last presentation, very helpful. I'm sitting on both sides of the table. I would very much like to see a goal of getting as close to the 5% as you can, but going slightly over would not be a killer. If there was something particularly important that you're skimping on, put it in and let's see where that comes out. But 6.72 is big, it's 7%. It's a lot, and I know that.
I've said enough. All set, thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said what I'm saying. I think that we need to make a real plan to do something strategic and long-term. I think doing this year to year, like you said, Bill, is not gonna work.
Yeah, so we say this every year, right?
I know.
And we've been saying this since we've been on school board, and you know what happens after the budget's done? Everybody walks away and doesn't think about it anymore.
Well, I don't know, and that's up to,
Until that invite comes.
well, it's up to someone to make it happen, but eventually at this point, like how many, at some point, we're gonna hit some point where more than 30% of the people at a school district meeting say no. And more people are gonna start coming to school district meeting. And then if we turn into Hopkinton, where, that feels really uncomfortable. I just don't see the point of getting there. I mean, I think, we talk about our great sense of community all the time, right? And I think that there are people, right, in the community who.
Hurting.
Yeah, and it's not because they're anti-education, right? It's not because they don't want to support this.
Oh, that sentiment needs to stop, right? That is absolutely something that we can't, right? Because that, and I will speak for that. I didn't actually have anything, but since it's my turn now, I'll take it. Because that's been a sentiment that's been promulgated in prior years as well, and that's absolutely not okay. Because what does that mean? We have only $1 to spend. And if we spend it all on the school, then we're not spending it on the fire department, right? So am I not pro fire department, right? Like, you can't, this is a balance, right? And even a 5% increase to the budget is more than CPI. And I asked you last time if you could look at that. I don't think you have. In the last 10 years, the school has gained 25% additional FTEs. That means that there's now more people to do effectively the same job because the students didn't go up. So I asked you last time, could you think about what that means in terms of the next year? Like, will you be sitting here next year and proposing another 7% increase? Where you're like, next year we're gonna be in CPI, I can see it like I'm looking at what, we built the school up to where we wanted, from now on it's gonna track the CPI. Right? In that case, 5% is a perfectly acceptable number. The moment you say, well, next year, I pulled from this buffer, from that buffer, next year I'm gonna be adding, it's gonna be a 10% increase, right? Then even a 5% I couldn't support. I think that's really important, that multi-year view. So did you have a chance to look at it? Do you have anything meaningful to say on that subject?
Yeah, as I said, we looked at all the resources that we have. And the charge to us was, what would you cut if you needed to do that? And this is where we landed. I think over time, I provided you that list of what's happening across the state, right? We are not the only district that is seeing increases above CPI. That's happening everywhere in the state. And it's happening in a lot of places that are losing students, not gaining them. So I think that strongly suggests that it's not something that Lyme is just not getting right. It's a more global systemic problem. We, the community of Lyme offers a remarkably strong program for students. There's strong intervention programs. There are strong opportunities regarding students looking at design labs and future types of skills that we know are important. With high quality teachers, we have people in place making sure that the system works. And so it's working, right? And the question for the community, if you don't want that level of program, then this is what it costs to deliver it.
No, I disagree with you on this, because what you just told me is that any growth in lockstep with CPI will be a reduction in program. But the numbers show that 10 years ago you were able to provide a program where students were scoring quite well, on 25% fewer staff members, right? Like, fewer people did the work. So you can't say, and then we also taught Spanish, and we also had lots of sped students, right? The needs were being provided for. So in the context of, listen, right, we've got a fire department that's strapped, we're barely able to maintain the roads, and we're really cutting in the municipal budget. And it is, I just don't accept you saying, listen, we can't provide the same quality education, unless we are, growing for however many years at whatever many level.
From what, the FTEs in the district have not grown.
Yes, they absolutely have.
Well, I will say that when you
Yeah.
look, when I've looked, and again, I'm new, and so I don't have a 10 or 15-year history, but FTEs have been right under 50 for quite a
The
while now.
last 4 years, that's right,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, if you go back 10 years, you'll find them, they were under 40, they were at 39. It doesn't matter, the point of the matter being is, what my comment started with is, like, the idea that if we have to grow within our means, right, grow with CPI, then that would be a material impact to the programming. And that is the point I challenge. That is probably not true. It is obviously, if I was in your seat, I would say that. Because it is the most, then people have a guttural reaction, like, oh my gosh, that cannot happen, but I don't think it's true, right? And sure, you can throw that point out there and people will react the way they react, but the reality of the matter is that we're straining everywhere else to continue to grow above CPI on the school budget. And that is something we, as a town, need to get a handle on, right?
Yeah, and what I would say, and I hear you, and I hear the challenges related to the fire department and home insurance. It's real, right? I don't wanna dismiss that at all. Are you asking me if we go to a 3% budget and we take out $350,000, that we're gonna provide the same quality of education that we're providing now? My answer is no. People are
So,
there.
but then what about next year? That was really my
Right,
question.
and
What is your growth next year gonna look like?
It depends a lot on what happens, right? But we are not adding programs anywhere. right? We are maintaining what we have. And I fully understand the need to, let's collectively think as a town, how we manage it. It is a difficult situation for a town, right, to say, we care about our kids, we care about our fire department, right? That balance is tough. And I can't solve it through you. I can tell you that if you take $350,000 out of the budget, that you're gonna lose something important. And at some point, the town may say, we're gonna have to lose that. That's not my decision to make, right? But I would not be honest with you if I said, yeah, we can pull this out and we will still be delivering the same quality program.
So what does
That would
next
have
year
to
look
change.
like? Just give me, like, because we both see, right, like what you do to make this, to come to that 5% point. That's gonna be back on the table next year as well, we can't, obviously need to maintain the building, that money's, right? So it's like, essentially, we're just robbing from next year, right? And the point that I asked you last time to look at is, can we look at these multiple years? Like, what is it, at what point are we gonna start tracking with CPI, which would be a fiscally responsible thing to do? Like, at what point does that start to happen? And you say that you don't know, yeah, I know.
Well, there are a number of things that happen, right? Like, what happens with open enrollment, what happens with contractual negotiations, what happens with, if we have students move in that have sped needs that are very expensive. There's all types I wish I had a crystal ball. What we look at is that next year, the numbers of students going into high school look a little bit lower, right? So that number looks a little bit better, right? This year, we're taking care of the structural deficit in food service program. We are dealing with an unanticipated $130,000 healthcare assessment. Those things hopefully will not be there next year. Some new version of something could come up. But if those don't hit, then we're probably gonna have a little bit more room. But I would be disingenuous to you to say, here's what you can expect for next year, because none of us really know.
No, and I think that's
I
fair
get
enough,
that,
right?
yeah.
It's fair enough, but it only underscores the need of what Bill is trying to say, right? Like, why, we should look at, and what Jenna's saying, we need to start looking at this in a larger context and not wait until next September when the invite comes and everybody goes like, oh my God, like, what are we gonna do? And the year by year is a real challenge, I think.
But also, looking at the budget that we presented, we did essentially hold to CPI net of the unforeseen expenses. We had deferred maintenance on the school that had to get paid for, and then we had an unforeseen healthcare. So strip those things out and we're down to 3%. So we are basically managing to CPI outside of the unforeseen. Now, do we need to budget better for unforeseen? Perhaps we need to think about a way to do that. But the way that you're phrasing your questioning makes it sound like there is an excess of staff and an excess of administration, and that everybody's sitting around and just kind of, taking it easy and, it's gonna be great. And that's not true. It's a incredibly lean, focused budget that had unanticipated costs this year that we're addressing, right? I mean, am I wrong in saying that?
I don't think that's for the budget committee to decide, right? Like, we just have the numbers that we need to come to terms with, and these numbers they haven't been on a reasonable trajectory, which is what a lot of people here are saying.
Yeah.
How those dollars were spent and whether, right, I also know that if you put 50 people in an organization, those 50 people will be busy. Nobody's gonna sit around. I don't think anybody argues that, but that's also not the budget committee's point to decide that. That's for Mary Beth to think about, right? That's for you to think about, if that's true. What the point I'm making is that that decision to put the money in the school is a decision to not put it elsewhere. And that's been going on for many years, and we're starting to really feel that pain on the municipal level, and that needs to be addressed. The argument is, right, let's address it through multi-year planning. Let's address it through, start thinking about this earlier, how can we do it? I mean, these are suggestions. Right? One thing I do know is at the moment, the budget is smaller by force, people find ways to, be creative. Maybe you do share a program, I don't know, right? It's obviously all up for the school to give that, the interpretation, but barring that necessity, right, the impetus to spend time on that is obviously lower, and I think that is something that we really do need to change. But anyway, that's not a question, you answered my question, Brian.
Just a second though, also just to push back on this idea that
going back
everybody's.
now.
Let's not go
everybody's-
backwards, let's keep going around the room and then we'll give you a
Okay,
rebuttal.
that's fine.
No, I feel sorry for our town, honestly, because this is just gonna be the same thing next year, and there's no easy answers to it. And unless we actually start to make real changes in the way we look at things, we're gonna hit an iceberg at some point. So I think honestly, doing a strategic plan makes a huge amount of sense. We do it in business, why wouldn't we do it for the town as well? Because, you're right, next year we're probably gonna be back in the same place. And nobody likes to cut things, I mean, it's hard, right? You're talking about people, you're talking about children, our children, which is, I think everybody in this room would sacrifice everything for their kids, but at some point, we have to come to the realization that we don't have unlimited resources, and we do have to make hard decisions, and we are gonna take from one thing we give to another, so if we don't start looking at the future and how we can either, the housing survey, come up with a way to increase the tax base and, start solving some of the real problems without the emotional elements into it, we're gonna be in a world of hurt.
I've said a lot. Nobody can accuse me of being anti-education. I've got a mile of letters of internship residents. I've taught on every level, from college to graduate school to medical school. I think our spending on the school is simply too high. I think that the tough decisions that have to be made are going to require potential personnel reductions. And were it up to me, I would push for the 3% budget and see how that worked. And maybe we've been providing a Porsche, and we can only provide a Honda Passport. And some of the rest of that money could build roads or help a fire department. But I'm going to take the difficult decision here. Yes, I think we need to cut staff and save money.
Next.
I'm struggling with, I've said a lot. I'm struggling with a couple things. I agree that we need to invest in both the school and the town. I do not think we stop investing in one thing to start investing in another, and I would push back that we do not invest in the town. We're sitting in a new building, relatively new building, I mean, for the age of the town. We have a new fire department, beautiful fire department, well-deserved. And I say that as the spouse of a firefighter. We have a new transfer station. We gave salary increases to people who well-deserved it, including an out-of-cycle one for the rec director, or not out of cycle, but higher than average one for the rec director, which was important to the select board. So I would push back that we don't invest in our town. I think we can do more. I know the town, and one of the things that we have pushed this year on the school board to do is to look at every single line item, because I know that's what the town does. And if we're gonna count paper clips in the town, we should count them at the school. And I asked Mary Beth in finance committee meeting, and I think that's what she's done. You know, we're talking about 50 cents for school lunch, things like that. So I would push back that we're not investing in the town. Our roads are in great shape, I think, better than they have been in a long time, I feel, and it's been several years, and I know it's also a struggle for the highway department to get there, but they do, and I think Scott and his team do a great job. I will also say that, and I don't want to get into a debate about it, but open enrollment is not a next year problem, it's also a this year problem. There are school districts that are talking about becoming open enrollment in schools this year under the current law, and they can and will affect other districts around them. So we have to keep that in mind, not just as a future problem, but a current problem. No, we don't have to have a Porsche, but I don't think we have a Porsche. I think we have a really good, solid, I'm gonna call it a Volvo, because that's what I drive. It's safe, it's reliable, it does the job. It's boring. Good government should be boring. I wish it were boring more in other places. This is not a new conversation. This has been a conversation that we've been having since I started going to school district meetings when only 6 people would go. And Andrea Colgan said, you should go because nobody goes to these meetings.
What do you mean? I was there once when Judy and I were the only 2 in the audience.
I would have increased the number by 50%.
Do it as strategic plan.
But, you know, we've looked at all these things a lot, and yes, we could go down to 3%. We would affect the quality of what you've already invested, what we've already collectively invested in the town, as a town. We would affect the quality of what we have. And that's gonna affect not just the students, it's going to affect whether people elect to move into this town, when it affects our property values. I could go on, I could talk for a long time, so I'm not going to, but I do want to say that we cannot stop investing in the school. Just because, you know, the parachute's open, we don't stop because, all right, now we've slowed down. You don't stop using the parachute, and it's kind of the same thing.
And
So,
one teacher is gonna do this.
yeah, special ed.
All right, all right, I know this isn't a public hearing, but we have public here. And the public has been, for the most part, very nice and quiet. But I would like to give you a chance to put in your 2 cents or 3 cents or whatever comments you might like to make. Dave?
I'm just here to observe for today.
I'm with the school board, I'm not really the public.
You should speak.
Same.
I want to thank all of you for caring just as much, I think, as we all do on the school board. The finances are often when the rubber meets the road, and all of your thought and consideration means a lot, not just to us, but to the students and to the town as well. So thank you very much for that. I would like to say that in terms of long-range thinking, I think not only, I'm new to the board this year, and I think in every single meeting that I've been a part of, we're not just thinking about the immediate, we are thinking about the long-term implications for our students. We're thinking about the cost implications of that and the ramifications on the town. I also think that when it comes to long-range thinking, you still have to make decisions at certain junctures in time that set a trajectory for the long term. I can think of several examples. One would be the school bond that we just voted on 2 years ago. 3 years ago, the warrant article came up for the new collective bargaining agreement. All of these are decisions that are inherently long-term thinking, and that we put a lot of time, we put a lot of effort in, we put a lot of thought into, and are publicly voted on. And that trajectory is somewhat set in course. So when we have a school insurance assessment, which we encountered this year, we have to honor a contract that we, agreed to several years ago and are on that trajectory. So I don't want that thought to be lost and think that we're just kind of playing it year by year, right? I think the hard work has been done, the debate has occurred, and decisions were, collectively voted on and made. And I think, as Mary Beth showed in our original presentation to you folks, proof is showing in our test scores, our performance, not only for our individual students, but statewide. And so I think what we're doing is working. And the town has supported that, I think, pretty wholeheartedly during my time here and previously. And it's part of all the work that we all do. So just wanted to say that, but again, thank you for all your hard work and effort.
Thank you.
We had some people that wanted to have a rebuttal comment.
Please make
I
sure.
didn't say anything the last time, so, it's come up a number of times in this discussion that, most recently, thank you, reminding us that many other communities in the state are having problems, similar discussions to ours. And that's probably been true for a long time, but we are still responsible for solving our own problems. Concord isn't going to help us solve our problems, so having said that, I mean, we've gotta look at ourselves here to figure this out. Whether it's long-range planning, reduction in staff, I think whatever that's going to be, but we can't stop acknowledging the fact that living in Lyme has gotten a lot more expensive vis-a-vis taxes, right? If nothing else. And for those people that live here who are no longer working and not getting pay raises every year, at best they're getting Social Security and maybe a little 401k or whatever. We do have a responsibility to not only the students, not only the roads, not only the fire, but we have responsibility to the taxpayers at some level. And that's part of what I think our responsibility is. So however we come back to look at that, we know we're gonna have to do this on our own. There's no other magic bullet out there, so to speak, that's going to come back and make this right for us. So I know we're all gonna cooperate, and I know we're gonna work hard on this, whatever that is. I think we have to recognize, though, that we're in this by ourselves. We're not gonna get anything from DC, and we're not gonna get anything from Concord, so.
There was someone, you had a,
No, I just wanna push back on the idea that having a 5% plus increase year to year is a foregone conclusion. And in the time I've been sitting here, Conval, much larger district than ours, this year is presenting a budget that's a 1.38% increase relative to last year. Lebanon's, they're presenting their budget committee with a 4.5% increase relative to last year. Mascoma's, their budget proposal is less than 1% over last year. All of this, by the way, they have the same healthcare problems that we do. Hanover will present 3.4% increase in their school budget this year. Plainfield is looking at 2.36%, a $200,000 increase on a budget of $8.7 million. I don't have this year for Grantham, but last year, Grantham went from 11.57 million to 11.94 million. 4%? What do you think? Less than 5%. It's not.
Yeah.
And I think that's my, if I have a really fundamental complaint, it's that it bothers me to hear you say it's a foregone conclusion that this can happen, but then I can sit here for 30 seconds and tell you that it's not, as evidenced by actual data that I pulled up from the Valley News. That tells me you're not thinking about it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a jerk, but I don't know what else to say. If I went to work and did that, if I went to work and somebody asked me, what's your budget gonna be next year? And I was like, well, I don't know, all these things could possibly happen, I can't possibly tell you, maybe 5% increase. I don't think it would, I just don't think it would go over very well.
So first of all, I wanna be clear that I don't think at any point I or the board have suggested that next year's increase is gonna be 5%. I think what was said is that there are a lot of volatile different issues, so it's very hard to predict that. And, I cannot speak for what communities have given up in order to hit different increases. I know our principal, John, sits on the board in Lebanon, and he talked about taking all kinds of money out of capital improvement projects to help solve his budget, their budget. They made decisions about what they weren't going to do in their community. You have every right to make that same decision. What the board and I are telling you is that if you make that decision, the quality of education will be impacted. And ultimately, that is a community decision. And not that we take very seriously, I think everybody here understands that there are community members that are struggling, and your points are incredibly valid. It's a really hard problem.
John
Yeah,
has his
wait.
hand raised.
Oh,
Yeah,
John?
that's what I
You
think.
have, the principal would like
let me
to
see.
make a comment.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I appreciate Jen's comments, and I, you know, as a school board member in a different community, and, you know, I figured I would share, you know, I'm very aware of the other communities. Dresden is 6+, currently, we'll see where they land. Lebanon was 4.5, Grantham was 6+, and Mascoma was 1%, but with significant decline in enrollment. And in Lebanon, we made very hard decisions as a school board, and we are going to lose some positions, and we are going to not fund significant amounts of capital improvement projects to keep the budget at a 4.5% increase due to our 19.6% increase in healthcare and our CBA negotiation agreements. We are significantly struggling with our budget in Lebanon, and we'll see what the town does at deliberative session in regard to what the school board did. It might be that the public decides to increase our budget to a higher level or settle where it is. We'll see what happens. So a lot of communities are hurting this year due to the health assessment that occurred. And I would hearken back to, I think it was Murray that mentioned earlier, you know, if you take away the health insurance and your CBA, you really are at a 3% increase. And that goes for many of our communities in the local area. So that's all I have to share. And, you know, I appreciate all your work and, you know, look forward to a number that you come up with. And we will work with whatever number that is.
Last year, there were 47 votes against the school budget. My concern is if we bring in a 5% budget, that a great many of the citizens, we only need like another 17 people to vote against the budget to defeat it. I think if you come back to, with a 5% budget, all of those people who are complaining to me on the streets, oh God, what are we gonna do, it's so expensive, are gonna vote against the school budget. And I'd like to bring them in something more economical.
What's the increase last year?
I think there are a number of us, as I would like to say in summary, that think the 6.7 is really what we should have. There are other people that say we've got to be down to the CPI at 2.9%. Now, we have to come up with something. If we come up with either extreme, we're not gonna have the votes to get it passed.
Can I ask a clarifying question? It's a majority vote on the budget, correct? It's not a 2/3 vote.
It's a majority vote,
Right.
2/3 for a bond.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, if we're at the two extremes,
Right.
we're not gonna have neither group is gonna have the votes to get it passed. Look at Washington DC right now, nothing gets passed.
I just wanted to clarify that.
So,
Let's not look and see.
Please, let's do it.
now,
Let's do it.
I think what we have as a duty of the budget committee is to give the school board and the school administration some guidance out of this meeting. Because we're getting short time-wise. Judy's gonna bring up something about our schedule in a minute, I think.
I think so.
So I would like to be able to say, when we have the next meeting on the school, which hopefully we will vote for the number to take to the public hearing. Now, is Judy prepared to say, is that gonna be next week or the week after?
It potentially could be next week, but it will probably be the week after the 21st, because we need to look at both the town and the school's budget and warrant articles, and we haven't done that yet.
All right, yeah.
So,
So,
what additional information does the committee need in order to?
all right, this is where I'm trying to get to, give you some guidance. So let's assume that 2 weeks from now, we will vote on what goes to the public hearing. Is everybody on board with that?
Yes, sir.
All right, we will have the benefit of seeing the town budget warrant articles before we vote on what the school goes to public hearing. Now, what guidance in terms of do we give the school board and administration for what to come in with in 2 weeks for our final discussion and vote to go to the public hearing?
In 2 weeks, what do you mean they should be coming to the next week
Then
with
the
whatever budget they
14th
want?
Is a
That's
discussion.
next week.
Right.
Both
No,
the
I know,
town
but I'm
and the
saying,
school.
both sides should be coming,
Yes.
school and town, with their
All right, I
budgets.
thought that was,
Then,
This is
then you
next
can
week.
vote
This is the,
to go to public hearing.
right.
well,
Well, are we gonna have enough time on the 14th with the town budget? Because we're 2 hours for this meeting and everybody gets a little star crazy 2-hour meeting.
usually we don't take a vote when we
Here.
talk about the warrant articles. We take a vote on the following.
All right, next week we meet.
Well, usually at this meeting, you have the warrant articles for.
We don't have,
Well,
Well, we will have the
it
next.
was just for
All
the
right.
school, that's why.
now,
you
the
don't.
question is, do we need more from the school? Or if we give them the number to work for that meeting where we vote for what goes to the public hearing? In other words, do they have to come in next week?
Yeah,
And I just wanna share again that one of the things that the board discussed last night was that they felt they could live with the 4.88 or the 5. I'm very mindful of the very incredibly tight timeline that we are on. And the next board meeting is not scheduled till next Tuesday. And so I don't know if that has any impact on what you
I
decide to do.
think that
as a
has a
board.
great deal of impact on what I'm gonna say next.
All right, there we go.
All right, I would like to have, it's not a formal vote per se, but I would like to give guidance to the school administration. You said it was possible to live with the 4.88. So I would like to propose we look to the meeting on the 21st with a 4.88 from the school.
Is it the 14th we need to talk about?
Yes.
Okay, we can do it next week.
But you need to
Yeah.
talk about it next
Do
Tuesday.
we need to vote as a board on Tuesday in order to bring it? I wanna make sure we don't have to go
I
back.
don't know what your administrative procedures are within the
I'll talk
school
to you.
board.
Thank you. I'll
And-
go
and
find that out
and you
outside.
need
of
your-
I'm trying to cover us,
We're on it, dear.
because we need a meeting, and we need to give the school, you people guidance on what we bring to that final budget committee where we vote for what goes to the public hearing.
Right, I just wanna make sure we are ducks in a row, so what we
Right.
give you is the right
Right.
number
Alright.
that we voted on.
And
if
Dick,
that's
I
what
just
we're-
wanna say that I think it's important that it happens next week, because we don't have a lot of time to go after that, we have that one other meeting.
I'm just saying, if, we've got an issue with the school board not
I get it.
meeting to give us, can you give us a 4.88 next week?
Yeah, we're meeting
Yes,
Tuesday,
they
but
said
I
they
just wanna
would.
make sure that if we
All
have
right.
to vote on Tuesday, we've done that on Tuesday.
And
Alright.
do
So
we
we
have
would on
to,
Wednesday.
Dina, do we
Sense
have
of
the warrant articles as well, right? We have
Yes,
to do both
we'll need
next
the
week.
warrant
Yes, we
articles.
just talked about that.
Right,
We're all
so we'll
set.
have that, we'll vote that and do that on Tuesday.
Yeah, these two got it all under control.
All right, I just want a sense of the meeting.
Welcome to
Is the sense of the meeting the 4.88 school budget plus warrant articles for next week's meeting?
Do you want?
Yes.
Yes.
And he knows.
The number or the action?
I vote yes on the action, you heard me say earlier, I think 5% to
Well,
somewhere else is,
well, they've got a 4.88 proposal here, which
yep.
came out of that end of the
I
table.
welcome your motion on the floor.
All
Take
right.
some of Dick's heat off of me.
All right, next week, the school will be 4.88 plus the warrant articles.
And what we can do is to take the line item budget and have that reflect the 4.8.
Right, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, okay.
We can't really vote on a dollar amount without that line item budget, can we?
No,
No, but we,
No.
but that
That's
will
why we're
allow
going
us
to-
to change the line item, and we should be able to get that to you relatively quickly, so you won't be getting it right before the meeting.
Right.
And so the town will also present the
Right.
operating budget and the warrant articles.
Right.
all right.
We should
And
also
I can
line-
send you the warrant articles tomorrow.
Oh, wonderful. All
Does that
right,
include the school?
No.
last item, last chance.
If I could just really quickly to the warrant articles for the school, and correct me if I'm wrong, there will be, other than the operating budget, there is no other dollar-related big ticket item warrant article, is that correct? I mean, there's
More
the
just like,
school,
we're gonna need some
officials.
language for the
Oh,
interest and
yes.
the principal going into the
Funds of
trust.
any
Yeah,
excess
yeah,
funds.
that is-
we're not expending those. we're
Which
accepting.
funds get any excess?
It's
And you also
nothing-
have the salaries warrant.
It's
article.
nothing to be raised by taxes.
Exactly.
Right.
All right, do we have anything else before we adjourn at 9:00?
I move to adjourn.
All right, anybody opposed can stay. I violated the law.
I know.